أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور الذي خلق السبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع ونعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير والذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور آمنتم من في السماء يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاسبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم من أمسك رزقا بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أخلق الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا ومن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري أنه قال عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي برسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة فقلت عليك السلام قال إني أجد في بدني ضعفا فقلت لو أعوذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به فصرت أنظر إليه فإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه فقلت عليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي فقال يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جدة يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي قد أذنت لك فدخل معه تحت الكساء فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه فقلت عليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي فقال لي يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأن رائحة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جدة السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء وقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي قد أذنت لك فدخل معهما تحت الكساء فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله فقلت عليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنه رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله فقلت نعم هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء قال له عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي قد أذنت لك ودخل علي تحت الكساء ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي قد أذنت لك فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ برسول الله بطرف الكساء وعم بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. صلى عليه. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. وقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لا أكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لي بإن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. وقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. وقال علي إذا والله فزنا وسعيدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعيدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد.
اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات. چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا، زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا، زہرا اصل میں ہے یہ تیرے نور کا صدقہ، زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا، زہرا آج بھی دیتی ہے آواز حدیث قدسی، آج بھی دیتی ہے آواز حدیث قدسی. تم نہیں ہوتی تو کچھ بھی نہیں ہوتا، زہرا اللہم صلی علی محمد. تم نہیں ہوتی تو کچھ بھی نہیں ہوتا، زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا، زہرا اس لیے ابیہا تمہیں کہتے ہیں نبی، اس لیے ابیہا تمہیں کہتے ہیں نبی. تم نے آغوش میں حسنین کو پالا، زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا، زہرا رازی کے کون مقافات ہیں، خیبر ہے مگر رازی کے کون مقافات ہے، خیبر ہے مگر مٹھیوں میں ہے، مٹھیوں میں ہے تیری رزق علی کا، زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا زہرا. قبلہ ہے آپ کے لیے. سورہ دہر نے یہ بات بھی ثابت کر دی سورہ دہر نے یہ بات بھی ثابت کر لی تیرے فاقے سے بھی ہوتا ہے افاقہ زہرا. اللہم صلی علی آداب آداب. سورہ دہر نے یہ بات بھی ثابت کر دی تیرے فاقے سے بھی ہوتا ہے افاقہ زہرا. چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا زہرا. حشر تک کیوں نہ وہ آرام سے آرام کرے حشر تک کیوں نہ وہ آرام سے آرام کرے تیرے قدموں پہ ہے اسلام کا تکیہ زہرا. چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا زہرا. ایک پیشانی حر ہے تو ہے ایک اشک ایسا ایک پیشانی حر ہے تو ہے ایک اشک ایسا مل گیا دونوں کو رومال تمہارا زہرا. اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی. مل گیا دونوں کو رومال تمہارا زہرا. چاند سورج جس کہتی ہے یہ دنیا زہرا التجا ہے یہ تکلم کی دعا دے دینا التجا ہے یہ تکلم کی دعا دے دینا جب بھی مختار سے سنا ہے یہ قصیدہ زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا زہرا اصل میں ہے یہ تیرے نور کا صدقہ زہرا چاند سورج جسے کہتی ہے یہ دنیا زہرا صلوات پڑھتی محمد
Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for the names, for the Salah Sawab of Marhumeen listed on the screen, and for all Marhumeen al-Fatiha. Hayy Munjibu is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us especially remember Motabah tonight for his quick recovery from his triple bypass surgery. Please recite 5 times Amma Yujibu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-muttarra iza da'ahu wa yakshifu su. عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 اللهم صل على. On behalf of all of us and Masjid al-Hayy, I'd like to extend a Kushani Mubarak to you all on the auspicious night of Eid Zehra. Youth Program. Masjid al-Hayy Youth Group is hosting their first game night on Saturday, October 31st, beginning at 7:30 p.m. in the Ladies' Dining Hall. Enjoy a wide variety of games, snacks, and activities for all youth ages 16 plus. It will be a night of fun you won't want to miss. Social distancing and masks are required. Milad al-Nabi. Masjid al-Hayy is excited to extend an invitation to the Muslim community of Orlando for an outdoor carnival celebration in honor of the birth of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The event will be held on Saturday, November 7th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and is free for all to attend. We'll be hosting activities for children, teens, children, parents, and seniors. There will be a large bazaar with a wide range of items that will be on sale and an area filled with rides, games, and raffles. And of course, there will be a variety of food and desserts on sale, in case if you're hungry. Families are encouraged to register using the link displayed on the screen. Limited tickets are available due to COVID, so register at your earliest. You do not want to miss out on the fun. We look forward to celebrating this day with you and your families. At this time, I would like to invite Sayyid Shabbir to come recite tonight's madlis. By Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman here in Orlando and across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what are we truly celebrating here tonight? Keep that question in the back of your mind, inshallah, we'll return to it. You see, there's a moment in time where the Prophet of Islam, the Messenger, the Holy Prophet, is asked in a gathering about love and hate. And he gives a momentous response. He says, هَلِ الْإِيمَانِ إِلَى الْحُبِّ وَالْبُغْضِ. He says, what is faith except love and hate? We have a same tradition like this, just from exactly like it, like from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Where he says, what is faith? What is deen? What is your belief? What is Islam? Except for love and hate. Love of what? Hatred of what? Love of that thing which is beautiful. Love of that thing which is good. Love of that thing which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to love. And hate. You may say, what about hate? Islam promotes hate? Yes. Hatred of that thing which Allah detests. such as oppression, such as dhulm, such as taking someone's right, such as usurping someone's right, such as killing an innocent person. These things have been detested in Islam as well as other major religions of the world. You see, when we come to a day like Eid al-Zahra, there are certain days that are specific, according to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that are particularly days for the mu'mineen. In fact, the riwayat from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have gone to the extent that said that there are certain days, and particularly certain Eids, that only a mu'min will celebrate and a munafiq will never celebrate. A hypocrite will never celebrate. And within the riwayat, you will find at the forefront of these 2 days are number 1, Ghadir, and number 2, Eid al-Zahra. Why? Because Eid al-Ghadir is that day which is the culmination and the moment where the imamat, of course the imamat begins before, but it's a symbolic day that represents the beginning of the era of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the first imam. And at the same time, when you come to Eid al-Zahra, it comes forward and shows us that Haydar-e-Karrar, the first imam, his reign has not ended. There is an imam in Ghaib as well today. And his imamat begins as well. You see, when you begin to discuss a day such as this, many people have this objection that Muslims seem very dry. Muslims seem very boring. Muslim seems very serious. You remember last night I mentioned what is happening in France. Just since we spoke last night, what happened? You must be watching the news. Just since we spoke, just since last night, the Prime Minister of Turkey gave 2 statements. One initially saying that a particular leader of a global country in the West should get a mental checkup. You may have seen this. Number 2, then he gave another statement. France revoked and called back their ambassador to Ankara in Turkey. On top of that, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, gave a statement via Twitter condemning what Macron has done in France. On top of that, Kuwait and other nations are in discussions right now of boycotting French products. You see, this matter is not of small insignificance. You see, what Macron did at that point in time was, he had a choice. He could have gone after the inequality that exists in France. Because if you know the history of France and you know what's going on right now, in Europe, in France in particular, and in Europe at large, Islam has become what academics call ghettoized. They have kept Islam intentionally in ghettos. These are not my words. These are the words of professors at George Washington University, professors at SUNY, professors throughout America have said that Islam has been ghettoized in Europe. So they don't want to give equal rights to Muslims in France. So what do? They attack Islam. Islam is the problem. So what the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, said, he said, look, what you're doing is actually empowering Islamophobes and extremists. Because you're saying Islam is the problem. And you're helping that narrative that they're saying that no. You see, the West is against Islam. No. I want to tell Mr. Macron and other people in the world that Muslims know how to celebrate. Because people come forward and say, Christians, they have Christmas. The Jews, they have Hanukkah. What days do Muslims celebrate? It seems like they're only trying to harm people, trying to hurt people. Well, Eid al-Zahra, let that be a marker for you and I. You see, when we come to commemorate Eid al-Zahra, there's 2 ways to do this. I can sit here and have an academic conversation with you, or we can truly celebrate, like a celebration. And I will judge and assess that based on what this dear brother recited in this manqabat, these beautiful words. I had intended to say something else, and I will get to that inshallah. But I want to highlight a few things with respect to what was said in this poetry. Because one thing that's very vital is that with the commemoration of Azah, we must also commemorate the happy occasions. The Eids, the Eidains, Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Ghadir, Eid al-Zahra also must be commemorated at a very high level. Because there's this concept of joy within the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We're not against that at all in any sense of the word. But when we come to Eid al-Zahra, what is it that exactly we are commemorating? And there are many questions with respect to this. The first element with respect to what we'll be analyzing tonight, I want to give you a brief overview. Number 1, we'll be looking at this idea of what are the various theories. Number 1, for example, what is the hadith of Rafa' al-Qalam? And where is it listed? And what is the significance of it? And what is the legitimacy of it? This is one level. Number 2, what happened on the time or during the time of Imam Sajjad alayhimus salam and what was brought in front of him that he expressed joy. Inside of this, the third level will be Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaid al-Thaqafi. Was this a good character or a bad character? Because you'll find hadiths on both sides with respect to him. Was he respected or detested by Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? Then we'll come to what is the significance of Imam Sahib al-Zaman, the Imam of our time, with respect to Eid al-Zahra. Is there a position? And finally we'll come to the fifth level. Are there certain things that are not to be mentioned right now? And from which platform that there's a time and space to discuss certain things? These are the 5 levels that we'll look at with respect to Eid al-Zahra, and inshallah I will revive your hearts with the poetry of Muhammad. Wherever you are, here in Orlando or across the globe, wherever you are hearing my voice, from the bottom of your heart, sadna salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah. I need to assess one thing as a speaker as a challenge. And that is, do I recite a milad or a jashan, the likes that you would have in Pakistan or India or East Africa and Tanzania or Uganda or Kenya, Nairobi or Mombasa? Or do I recite one that is totally academic? Now you see, there's a challenge here. And I need to assess that. So I will test that by 4 lines of poetry. Based on the response of that, I'll be able to move forward and see which track do I go down. Do I go down the academic track or do I go down the celebratory track? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Because you see, Eid al-Zahra from the onset is also another declaration. One of the declarations of Eid al-Zahra is the victory of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. You see, in this world today, although there may be certain people in some parts of the world, I'm looking at Pakistan for example, who are trying to bring up the likes of Yazid and others, you would be hard pressed if you only went back a few years, not very long ago, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, to even try to say one line in honor of, I can't even say the word honor, about Yazid in a positive light. But today somehow this has happened. You see, one of the things about Eid al-Zahra is the victory of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Aankhon mein jagta hai sada gham Hussein ka. Aankhon mein jagta hai sada gham Hussein ka. Seene mein saans leta hai matam Hussein ka. आंखों में जागता है सदा गम हुसैन का, सीने में सांस लेता है मातम हुसैन का, और मिट्टी में मिल गए हैं इरादे यजीद के, लहरा रहा है आज भी परचम हुसैन का. मिट्टी में मिल गए हैं इरादे यजीद के, लहरा रहा है आज भी परचम हुसैन का. That alam that exists, whether it's in the Zari Khana or it's outside in the main road next to the flags, that flag is declaring that there is victory. That flag is declaring that there has been a victory in our world. But I think I got my answer. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. I'll give it another try towards the end. This is going to be an academic conversation. Another Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali. Ayatollah Behjat, Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Behjat, who passed away not too long ago, maybe 5-10 years ago, one of the big urafa, big ulama. They asked Ayatollah Behjat, they said, what should we talk about on Eid al-Zahra? He was a big arif, big alim, but at the same time, he's not a small scholar. He's someone who dedicated his life to knowledge in Najaf and Qom. So he's read all the riwayat, he's read all the hadiths, he knows what's going on. He said, what do we talk about? Because the people who asked him were also scholars, lower level scholars, but they knew Islam. They knew fiqh, they knew what the background of Eid al-Zahra is. He said, I advise you that on Eid al-Zahra, talk and discuss as much as possible about Fatima al-Zahra. Because you see, the personality of Fatima al-Zahra is the people who have love for her in their heart, they will get happy. And the people who have animosity and bughd and adawat, they will burn. So by talking about this lady, this great lady more and more, that memory will be revived in the hearts of the believers, and those who are enemies of her, they will burn. As the poet was reciting, and our brother was reciting in the ayat, he was referring to Surah Al-Dahr. My dear brothers and sisters, never forget Surah Al-Dahr, Surah Al-Insan of the Quran. If anyone ever asks you, where are Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein in the Quran? a undisputed place, according to all Muslims, is Surah Dahr, Surah Insan. No doubt whatsoever. هل أتى على الإنسان بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. This verse, these verses, all of them except, at the minimum, the first 18 verses of Surah Dahr are all for Ali Muhammad. But most Muslims say the whole chapter, the whole surah was revealed for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You know the very famous story where they were fasting for 3 days. And the Quranic verse came, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَعَسِيرًا. That they give away their bread, they give away their food, they give away in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the poor, to the orphan, to the wayfarer. That was for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. But on top of that, there was a line, if you were listening very carefully, and I tell everyone, especially the youngsters, pay very close attention to what is being recited in the ash'ar, in the manaqib, in the manqabats, in the, for example, those recitings, even in the latam and noha, in the sad days, because each line is pointing oftentimes to a historical reality. And there's a depth there that you need to understand. You see, for example, when we talk about the rumal of Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, it should not be taken lightly. Ayatullah Najafi Mar'ashi, Shahabuddin Najafi Mar'ashi, he led the salat, the namaz in the haram of Ma'suma Qom for 60 years. Almost his whole life in the haram, he's leading the namaz. He has the largest library. China's building a huge one, but until that's built, the largest library in Asia is Ayatollah Bashir Najafi's library. This person dedicated his entire life to doing what? He dedicated his entire life to take loans and buy rare manuscripts to preserve Tashayyu, Shiaism for you and I. To the extent that he used to go to faqas and fast all day and night. You know, he would take loans from his students in order to buy a book, to preserve it. You know what a manuscript is? A manuscript is a book that has no second copy. It's the original copy. And if you don't preserve that book, you lose that forever. So if he found a rare book of Shiaism, he would preserve it to that extent. This Ayatullah Najafi Mar'ashi, he writes a will, a wasiyah, one private, one public, to his son. One which was for the open public, one which was private. 25 points in the public one, I recommend you all read. 3 of them directly related to Fatima al-Zahra. This man, imagine how many books Ayatollah Shahabuddin Najafi Mar'ashi has read. The person who dedicated his life to books. He says, my son, never forget, with respect to Fatima al-Zahra, 3 things. Number 1, and he listed these as 3 separate points, not under 1 point. He said, make sure, number 1, you never forget khutbah fadakiyah. The khutbah, the sermon of Fadak, never forget it. He said, some of the biggest adibs, some of the biggest linguists, some of the biggest literature aficionados of Arabic, some of the biggest scholars of Arabic, some of the biggest ulama of Arabic have neglected the Arabic language of this khutbah. Never forget it. You know, the Sadat especially, but many people, particularly the Sadat, when you used to migrate because of persecution to Iran and remote parts of Iran, then they would migrate to India and other places. They would make sure, if they didn't know anything else, they made sure that they made their younger generation, their children, memorize the khutbah of Fadak by heart. Because they said, even if you're nowhere, you know what your identity is if you know that khutbah. That's how powerful and important. He said, number 1, never forget that khutbah, number 1. He said, number 2, never forget the tasbih of Fatima al-Zahra. That tasbih that we often recite. He said, don't think this is something that you only recite after salah, after namaz. He said, this will help you in the most difficult times, whether you realize it or not. And he said, number 3, which I recommend we all do, he said, my son, do not ever neglect in the qunut of salat, reciting bihaqqi Fatima, wa abiha, wa ba'liha, wa baniha, wa sirril mustawdi'a fiha. Oh Allah, by Fatima and her father and her husband and her sons, and the secret with which she is buried. You see, Fatima al-Zahra is not known in this world. She will not be known in this world. She will be known on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the day of judgment, when there's a cry, Ya ahla mahshar, ghuddu absarakum. O people of the day of judgment, lower your gaze, for Fatima enters. There's a secret. We don't even know where she's buried. The ulama have said, there's 3 theories about where Fatima al-Zahra is buried. One is in her own room. The famous one is Jannatul Baqi, number 1. The second one is in her own room, her hujra. The third is a hadith, based on a hadith of Rasulullah, where he said that between my mimbar and my home, there is rawzatan min riyad al-Jannah. There is a garden from amongst the gardens of Jannah. The ulama say it's very possible, and some say probable, that she's buried there. But it's a wish of Allah that it's kept secret. وَسِرَّ الْمُسْتَوْضِعَ فِيهَا. So never forget the position of Fatima al-Zahra. Why I say this? Because the one who is mansoob to Fatima al-Zahra, we don't know their position. What's the dalil? What's the proof? The biggest criminal, one may argue, up until that moment where he turned, the biggest criminal, one may argue, in the plains of Karbala was Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi, until he changed. He's the reason the Imam ended up there in Karbala. But he changed at one moment. And that change changed the entire dynamics of who he is, of his personality. Who was Hur? Who is this individual? That up until the moment where he made the movement towards Imam Hussein alayhi salam's camp, he was the worst person, one may argue, because he was commanding the forces to get the Imam where he needed to get to. If he didn't make that decision and make that turn, what would happen? Hamashab intizare subh visal, the poet says with respect to Hur. Hamashab intizare subh visal, aur shab nahi zindagi guzari hai, aur faisle ka hai ek pal varna, faisle ka hai ek pal varna, sochne ko to umr sari hai. He had one moment, Hur, to make a decision. He could have been, there were other people maybe in the camp of Yazid who were thinking and thinking and thinking. Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? But he made a decision. That decision changed Hur's life. Dr. Ali Shariati says, we are all Hur, whether we realize it or not. Metaphorically. We all have a decision to go from darkness towards light. We all have a decision to go from sins towards goodness. But taking the action is what makes someone like Hur. The action is what changes everything. And the poet continues, Do qadam reh gaya hai khayma-e Shah. Do qadam reh gaya hai khayma-e Shah. Hur pa ye waqt kitna bhari hai. 2 steps away is the camp of Hussein. How heavy is this moment for Hur? You see, he doesn't know how the Imam will receive him or not. And he's burnt the bridges behind him. He can't go back to Yazid's army. So the only thing in front of him is the son of Fatima al-Zahra. And how he accepted. This is what I wanted to say, the line that the poetry was alluding to. Why did I mention Shahabuddin Najafi Marashi? Ayatullah Shahabuddin Najafi Marashi also said in his private will to his son, he said, my son, I have a rumal, I have a handkerchief. That handkerchief, I spent my entire life keeping it in the azab Sayyid al-Shuhada. My tears are drenched in that. I want you to do one thing, bury me with that rumal, bury me with that handkerchief. That is one level. The other level, Hur, during the Safavid dynasty or the Qajar dynasty, 300 to 400 years ago, 500 years old maximum, there was a ruler in Iran. He said, I want to see whether Hur was good or bad. He said, I want to know whether he's good. And he was a ruler, you couldn't stop him, he owned the whole territory. He said, dig up the grave of Hur. They said, you can't, he's part of the Shuhada. Like, how are you going to exhume his body? How are you going to take his body out? He said, I said it, get it done. They took out the body of Hur. When they took out the body of Hur, he saw the rumal of Fatima al-Zahra that Imam Hussein had tied on his forehead. He didn't stop there. He said, I want that rumal. I want that handkerchief. I want that for myself. They said as soon as they tried to remove it, blood began to gush out. Blood began to gush out hundreds of years later. Don't think Fatima al-Zahra, don't think your azah, don't think your crying that you've done for 2 months and 8 days is something light. It's massive, it's huge in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never neglect it. These tears, these commemorations, this love of Ahlul Bayt is what will keep you and I going. Many of us grew up in environments such as Tanzania or Kenya or Uganda or East Africa or India or Pakistan. There was a certain level of love, compassion and emotional connection. That needs to continue. I'm not against, and I'm one at the forefront of academic discussions. But there's 2 things. There's aql and there's ishq. There's reason and there's love. Our lives are between these 2 things. If I use reason, but there's some element that Allah has given me of ishq, of love, of emotion, of compassion, that love that a mother has for her child keeps the child alive. That love, which many, maybe fathers may not even have that level, because the connection that Allah has made between a mother and the child is second to none. There's an element of emotion. That emotion, whether it's crying for Sayyid al-Shuhada and the Ahlul Bayt, or whether it's being happy and ecstatic in their joyous occasions and Eid, that is what keeps these commemorations going. Ask your elders. Ask around. They'll tell you. People closing up their businesses on Ashura and throughout those days. People coming for the Eidains. People coming for Ghadir, being big occasions. Eid al-Zahra, all of these things. Nonetheless, I come to the first theory about what is the theory behind Eid al-Zahra. There is a tradition, and this shouldn't be taken lightly, because the people who have narrated this are Allama Majlisi, Sahib Bihar al-Anwar. Now, I'm giving you some background that you need to know. Because within our school of thought, there are some ulama, there are some scholars who say everything that is in Bihar al-Anwar, everything that is in Usul al-Kafi, Man la yahdaru al-faqih, tahzeeb and istabsar. Okay, hold on one second. I've thrown a lot at you. First of all are the Kutub Arba, the first 4 books. Al-Kafi, Man la yahdaru al-faqih, tahzeeb and al-istabsar. These are from the 3 Muhammads. These scholars, all of their first names are Muhammad. The first one is Al-Kafi by Muhammad bin Yaqub al-Kulaini. The second is Man la yahdaru al-faqih by the likes of Muhammad ibn Babawayh al-Qummi, also known as Sheikh as-Saduq, very famous scholar. The last one, Tahzeeb and Istibsar, are 2 different books by the same scholar, by the name of Sheikh at-Tusi. You need to remember these names thoroughly, because they laid the foundation of hadith within Shia Islam. These people are those names you must know. Then there's Bihar al-Anwar. Bihar al-Anwar was written during the Safavid dynasty, during the era and the time of the Safavids, roughly 500 years ago. Allama Majlisi was the main scholar of the Safavids. Allama Majlisi has written Bihar al-Anwar. Bihar al-Anwar, they say, is 110 volumes, not pages, not book. It's volumes, 110 volumes. By the way, on a side note, there's more than that, but the Iranian government doesn't allow certain of them to be published. There's more than 110. Nonetheless, there's many volumes of this book. So there's a group that was called the Akhbaris. There's very few left. Akhbaris, those who believed in ijtihad, not the one in particular parts of India, for example. Akhbaris believed that generally, that everything that's in Bihar, everything that's in Usul al-Kafi, everything in all of these books is all authentic. That's one category. There's another category of Usulis. Usulis will be in the Najaf Hawza, the Qum Hawza, the major Hawzas of Islam. These Usulis say even Al-Kafi, Al-Kafi is the most authentic book of hadith that we Shia have. They say even in Al-Kafi you will find 1 or 2 hadiths that are not authentic. Even in Al-Kafi you can find, based on their sanad, their ilm al-rijal, and also based on the content. But there's another category that goes to the other end that says anything you find in Shia books is acceptable. So this is the first thing. So based on this, now that you know this, the next level is Allama Majlisi narrates from Sayyid ibn Tawus. These are 2 big names. They relate this Hadith Biharul Anwar. Allama Majlisi narrating from Sayyid ibn Tawus, that there is a hadith about Rafa al-Qalam. Rafa al-Qalam means the picking up of the pen. The pen does not record. The pen does not write down on Eid al-Zahra. What? The sins of the Shia. The sins of the Shia on 9th of Rabi al-Awwal on Eid al-Zahra are not recorded. And in the beginning it says something else, which I cannot say here. But I invite you to read that hadith. And in that it says, on this day, the kalam, we have these 2 angels on our shoulders who write down good and bad deeds. The bad deeds on this day are not written. Now, one group of scholars, they come forward, they accept it. There's another group that they reject it. There's another group that says it's partially true, partially not. And what's the basis? One group comes forward and says, hold on a second. This riwayah that Allama Majlisi is taking from Sayyid ibn Tawus, the book that he's referencing was written by not Sayyid ibn Tawus himself, but his son. So it's not the very, very famous Sayyid ibn Tawus, it's his son who was also known as Sayyid ibn Tawus. So he said it's not that reliable, number one. Number two, with respect to this issue, there are certain ones who say that it's correct in some sense, but it needs to be explained. What does that mean? That it says the things are not written for the Shia. There's a difference between Muhib and Shia. There's a difference between someone who loves the Ahlul Bayt, and there's a difference between someone who is a Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. Shia is Salman, Shia is Miqdad, Shia is Abu Dhar. Shia is this level, Ammar bin Yasir. These people. And maybe close to them. But not every person is a Shia. We may be Muhib. So this comes forward. There's a third level, a category of scholars, they say, hold on a second. When it says Shia, you see Shia are those people who would not sin anyways. They wouldn't do any sin anyways. Sin is way far from them. You may say, what type of people are these? Some of our Maraja, they have not, some of them, have not even done makruh in their life, according to their students and closest confidants. They have not even done makruh. Forget haram. So there are certain people like this, maybe we don't know. But they said it's very clear that somebody wouldn't do this anyways. Number one, this is Rafa al-Qalam. The second hadith which I want to share with you is according to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that there was a moment in time, Imam Sajjad alayhimus salam in Medina after Karbala, he would, after finishing his salah in the masjid, he would come back to a gathering and he would have breakfast with his close confidants, and it was open to people. When he would have this breakfast, he sat down one day to have this breakfast with some of the close confidants. When he sat down with them, there was a moment in time a messenger came with something in his hand and a letter. Karbala happened in the 61st, 61 AH. Mukhtar's rising happened in 66 AH, according to some ulama. 5 years later. Because you know, after Karbala, Yazid attacked Medina and he attacked Makkah. He ruled for 3 years in total, and then he died. So at that point in time, Imam is sitting with his companions, his comrades, someone comes and he brings a letter and he brings something in a bag. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I've brought a letter for you from Mukhtar. He said, what's in the bag? Imam knew, of course he's showing in front of the Shia. He opened it, and according to riwayah, is the head of Umar ibn Sa'ad. The person who was responsible, the commander in Karbala, his head was there. The Imam alayhimus salam, according to the riwayah, he smiled and he became happy. In other traditions, there are numerous traditions on this. In other traditions it says it was Umar ibn Sa'ad, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, ibn Namir, and other people, Khuli as well. And then the Imam alayhimus salam said, tell Mukhtar to send the head of Hurmala bin Kahil, the one who shot the arrow towards the 6-month-old child of Abu Abdullah. He said, I'm waiting for that head. On top of that, when this happened in this gathering, the people saw the Imam be joyous after some very long time. He said, today I tell Ali Muhammad, our family, who has not been happy for months and years on end, I want that you spark up the stoves and cook things and also have sweets, and I invite the women of Ali Muhammad to dress celebratory today, because it's such a happy day. But on top of that, the riwayah says something interesting. It says the Imam alayhimus salam, he was looking and smiling at the face, because they said, they looked to the Imam, they said, Imam, why are you smiling at this face? As in, the Imam is a reflection of the mercy of Allah on earth. The Imam, there must be some reason why the Imam is smiling. He says, what's the reason? The Shia said, why are you smiling, Yabna Rasulullah, at this level? He said, my dua has been accepted. He said, what dua? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, what dua? He said, there was a moment in time when we were in Kufa and Sham, and in this, after Karbala, that this mal'oon, this la'een, he was eating, and then the head of my father came in front of him. And he was smiling and joking. And I prayed to Allah, Ya Allah, avenge this moment. You see, Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam were people of mercy and raham. But at the same time, whenever someone killed, for example, Ali Akbar in Karbala, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he said, oh, Ya Allah, make him taste a difficult moment in this dunya. Imagine how much it hurt the heart of Abu Abdullah when they killed Ali al-Akbar. That Imam is saying this to that person. On one side, the Imam alayhi salam is crying. They said, Ya Hussein, why are you crying? He said, I'm not crying for any reason. I have no fear of death. I am the son of Fatih Khaybar. He says, I'm crying because you will go to hell forever because you're killing me. Imagine the mercy of the Imam. But imagine at the same time how much dhulm they had done to the heart of the Imam. That the Imam is saying this. He said, when he did this and he said this to my father's head, I did a dua to Allah, that Allah, when I want vengeance and I want justice, that when I am eating, send his head to me. And his head came at that moment in time. So therefore, the second level analysis, one is Rafa al-Qalam, which some ulama accept, some reject, and some take partially. The second level of analysis of Eid al-Zahra is the heads coming to Imam Sajjad and him inviting and telling Ali Muhammad to celebrate on this day and commemorate this day. Then there's another analysis, that is the coronation day of Imam Sahib al-Zaman. That is the 11th Imam's martyrdom, his shahadat. Now it is the day where the 12th Imam's rule and his reign continues, and he's the Imam of our time. There is another tradition which I won't speak of, you can do your homework on. By the way, because when Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaidah al-Thaqafi, when he took quote unquote revenge, is this true revenge? You see, has it been equalized? Is the issue equal? No. He did what was ever in his capability and his ability. You see, when we come to this issue and this matter, Ayatollah Khoi, one of the biggest scholars of the 20th century, in fact, they say that the level of fiqh, that the standard that Ayatollah Khoi took fiqh to in the 20th century, maybe no one else took to. He's saying, when he was asked, was Mukhtar good or bad? Why? Because in the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt, you will find some riwayas in favor and some against Mukhtar. So somebody who doesn't know the context would be confused. So what's the answer? Ayatollah Khoi analyzed this and he commented on this topic. You see, in many Imams' eras, there was taqiyya. Taqiyya meaning you have to protect your faith and the Shias. Your ultimate goal is to protect Shiaism. An example of this is Zurara. Some of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they say, oh, you Shia, you call Zurara, who's a good companion, you call him bad. What is wrong with you? You don't even know your own fiqh. The son of Zurara, he came to Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. He said, Yabna Rasulillah, the people, they taunt me because you have sayings against him. Zurara, my father. What's the issue? What's the matter? At that point in time, he responded, I did for your father what Musa and Khidr, what Khidr did with the boat. He said, what do you mean, what Khidr did to the boat? He said, remember when Khidr was with Musa, he drilled a hole in the boat. Why? So that they don't steal the boat. But the owner of the boat could patch up the hole and fix it right away and keep the boat. Because they were boat bandits at the time. He said, I did the same thing. If Zurara, who was a good person, was seen connected to us, the Ahlul Bayt, they would have finished him off and he could not serve the Shia in his position. He said the same thing with Mukhtar. Now they said, so now there's riwayat in favor and against Mukhtar. So which one's which? Are the ones in taqiyya the one against him or the one in favor of him? One of the two have to be wrong. He said, the proof and evidence that the Imam said, I am waiting for the head of Hurmala, is evidence that the ones against him were in taqiyya and the one in favor is the truth. Why? Because the Imam, even in taqiyya, would never tell someone to do something haram. As in, the Imam would never tell someone to go and bring me the head of somebody who's innocent. Imam would never do something like this. And the second level, Sayyid Khoi says, after the person died, the Imam continued to praise him. That may Allah have mercy on Mukhtar, that because of him, the children of Ali Muhammad and the women smiled for some time. Therefore, Mukhtar is blessed. We must not get it twisted. Therefore, these are the three levels, and some say the fourth level, which I leave for homework, with respect to Eid al-Zahra. In fact, there is one tradition, even that's a very small one, that's not my majority, that Bibi Fatima, Lady Khadija, and Rasulullah got married on the 9th or 10th. There's a dispute, but that's also. But the khulasa and the culmination is, we take all of these together and commemorate the Ahlul Bayt, knowing that Imam Sahib al-Zaman is yet to come and he's the true avenger of Karbala. Because as a hint for you and I, the ayat and the ziyarat says, وَلَعْنَ اللَّهُ الْمُمَحِّدِينَ لَهُمْ بِالتَّمْكِينِ مِنْ قِتَالِكُمْ بَرَعْتُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِكُمْ. Right? the riwayat in Ziyarat Ashura, what do you say? And also la'an on those people who laid the groundwork so Yazid could do what he did. So go and read history. Who are the people who laid the foundation? Our ulama have said, قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِالسَّقِيفَةِ لَا بِكَرْبَلَةِ. That's enough homework that I'll leave for today. But on this issue, given the dynamics of the world, I'm not going into detail, but I leave this for homework. The main issue that the ulama say is, Fatima al-Zahra must be remembered as much as possible, and Imam Sahib al-Zaman must be remembered as much as possible on this particular day. And therefore, what other better way than to revive the hearts with the poetry? Anis, the poet says, Dono yatim Hazrat Muslim the kya aqil. Remember, Muslim ibn Aqil is the first martyr of Karbala. Before even Karbala, he's the ambassador of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The first one was commemorated, Muslim ibn Aqil. Remember his sons, Tiflan Muslim, who are in Musayyab if you've gone to Ziyara. Dono yatim Hazrat Muslim the kya aqil. Aqil. Look at the play on words, because they were sons of Muslim ibn Aqil. دونوں یتیم حضرت مسلم تھے کیا عقیل, حاضر تھے با ادب عقب سرور جلیل, آپس میں کہتے تھے کہ پدر تو ہوئے قتیل, ہم کوفیوں کو ماریں گے عمریں ہیں گوہ قلیل, گھر سے طلب کیا تھا اسی اعتقاد پر, لعنت خدا کی مذہب ابن زیاد پر. گھر سے طلب کیا تھا اسی اعتقاد پر, لعنت خدا کی مذہب ابن زیاد پر. اور روح ازاں ہے باپ تو بیٹا نماز دیں, روح ازاں ہے باپ تو بیٹا نماز دیں, مسجد علی کی ہے تو مصلی حسین کا. روح ازاں ہے باپ تو بیٹا نماز دیں, مسجد علی کی ہے تو مصلی حسین کا. اور جاگیر کبریا ہوئی تقسیم اس طرح, جاگیر کبریا ہوئی تقسیم اس طرح, کعبہ علی کا عرش معلی حسین کا. یا علی علی, جاگیر کبریا ہوئی تقسیم اس طرح, کعبہ علی کا عرش معلی حسین کا. Either the arsh of Allah is mu'alla or Karbala is mu'alla. The poet is highlighting this reality. But he goes further. رتبے میں ہو نجی تو وہی شان چاہیے, اب نوح کو نجات کا سامان چاہیے. رتبے میں ہو نجی تو وہی شان چاہیے, اب نوح کو نجات کا سامان چاہیے. کشتی ہو بادباں ہو نگہبان چاہیے, کشتی ہو بادباں ہو نگہبان چاہیے. کشتی کے تیرنے کو بھی طوفان چاہیے, کشتی کے تیرنے کو بھی طوفان چاہیے. لیکن یہ معجزہ ہے شہ مشرقین کا, خشکی پہ تیرتا ہے سفینہ حسین کا. لیکن یہ معجزہ ہے شہ مشرقین کا, خشکی پہ تیرتا ہے سفینہ حسین کا. درود بھیجے محمد والے محمد پر. جذبہ الفت سرکار نے خط لکھا ہے, جذبہ الفت سرکار نے خط لکھا ہے. ایک شہنشاہ کو نادار نے خط لکھا ہے, ایک شہنشاہ کو نادار نے خط لکھا ہے. اس لیے اشکوں سے لکھا کہ یہ ظاہر ہو جائے, اس لیے اشکوں سے لکھا کہ یہ ظاہر ہو جائے. شاہ والا کے عزادار نے خط لکھا ہے, اس لیے اشکوں سے لکھا کہ یہ ظاہر ہو جائے. شاہ والا کے عزادار نے خط لکھا ہے. تو لب سجاد پا تشدید تبسم کے لیے, لب سجاد پا تشدید تبسم کے لیے. The letter is to Imam Sahib al-Zaman, if you're not following. The letter is to Imam Sahib al-Zaman, and I'm talking about Karbala. The tashdid means the repeating of the smile. Tashdid tabassum. Lab sajjad pa tashdid tabassum ke liye. Lab sajjad pa tashdid tabassum ke liye. Jazba-e Hazrat Mukhtar ne khat likha hai. Lab sajjad pa tashdid tabassum ke liye. Jazba-e Hazrat Mukhtar ne khat likha hai. اور تم اپنے اجداد کے پرچم کو سنبھالو آ کر, تم اپنے اجداد کے پرچم کو سنبھالو آ کر, کٹے ہاتھوں سے علمدار نے خط لکھا ہے. تم اپنے اجداد کے پرچم کو سنبھالو آ کر, کٹے ہاتھوں سے علمدار نے خط لکھا ہے، اور مثل زلف شب امید بکھر کر دیکھوں، مثل زلف شب امید بکھر کر دیکھوں، عشق کی آخری سرحد سے گزر کر دیکھوں، سوچتا ہوں یہ بھلا رسم عریضہ کب تک، اس برس خود ہی میں دریا میں اتر کر دیکھوں، سوچتا ہوں یہ بھلا رسم عریضہ کب تک، اس برس خود ہی میں دریا میں اتر کر دیکھوں۔ آخری شعر، اس کے بعد زحمت تمام۔ اے باغ عسکری کے مقدس ترین پھول، اے باغ عسکری کے مقدس ترین پھول، اے کعبہ فروع نظر قبلہ اصول، آ ہم سے کر خراج دل و جاں کبھی وصول، اور تیرے بغیر ہم کو قیامت نہیں قبول، تیرے بغیر ہم کو قیامت نہیں قبول، دنیا نہ مال و زر نہ وزارت کے واسطے، دنیا نہ مال و زر نہ وزارت کے واسطے، ہم جی رہے ہیں تیری زیارت کے واسطے، دنیا نہ مال و زر نہ وزارت کے واسطے، ہم جی رہے ہیں تیری زیارت کے واسطے۔ We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this holy gathering, to allow us to fill our hearts with the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, to fill the hearts of our next generation with the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, to allow us to have a deeper and stronger connection with the Imam of our time alayhimus salam, to get rid of this COVID disease, this virus from our world, and give shifa to all those who are suffering, to fill our earth with peace and equity in our world, one where there is no Islamophobia, one where there is no extremism, one where there is harmony amongst the nations. And we ask, Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. For your marhumin, for our marhumin, for all those who do not have someone to recite a Fatiha for them, Surah al-Mubarakat al-Fatiha, before it, the loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat.
برائے خوشنودی امام زمانہ باواز بلندتر صلوات۔ عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے، وہ جس کے احترام میں، وہ جس کے احترام میں در پہ کھڑے رسول ہے، بنت نبی بطول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے، سجدے کرے ہزار تو دل میں ہو بغض فاطمہ، سجدے کرے ہزار تو دل میں ہو بغض فاطمہ، دل میں ہو بغض فاطمہ، جنت میں تو بھی جائے گا یہ سوچنا فضول ہے، یا علیم وہ جس کے احترام میں، وہ جس کے احترام میں در پہ کھڑے رسول ہے، بنت نبی بتول ہے جو بنا الہ خیر النساء کا لال ہے جو بنا الہ خیر النساء کا لال ہے، خیر النساء کا لال ہے، جس کے لیے نبی دیا سجدے کو رہنے طول ہے، وہ جس کے احترام میں، وہ جس کے احترام میں در پہ کھڑے رسول ہے۔ یہ آخری شعر جو ہے ملاحظہ فرمائے گا کیونکہ یہ فدق کے ساتھ تعلق ہو رہا ہے ان کا۔ ہر شاہ دو جہان کی ان کو جہیز میں ملی، ہر شاہ دو جہان کی ان کو جہیز میں ملی، ان کو جہیز میں ملی، مجھ کو قسم خدا کی فدق ان کے قدم کی دھول ہے، وہ جس کے احترام میں، وہ جس کے احترام میں در پہ کھڑے رسول ہے، بنت نبی بتول ہے۔ باواز بلندتر صلوات۔ متوجہ لزیارت بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد۔ السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبي الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا قصة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس وانيس النفوس، أيها المدفون بأرض الطوس الراضي بالقدر والقضاء ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات اللهم صل على